anything from McDonald's.
Pizza.
Braaivleis.
Sweets. Oh, I love sweets.
A burger, chocolate.
Pizza is probably my favorite meal.
I visit the kiosk about once in every 2 days at least, but maybe more. It depends on my money.
Most of the time when I'm studying, I need to snack, and if I can't concentrate, I'm gonna go get a snack.
Oh yes, I get so hungry, I get hangry, I get hungry, angry, and then I can't work at all.
I really need my snacks to help me maintain my focus.
Sometimes I really suffer from headaches, like if I don't have a meal within the next 3 to 4 hours.
Good day, and thank you for joining us for today's live stream. Plastic is one of the most pervasive materials on the planet, and its impact on human health has been explored minimally. Yet, exposure to plastic is expanding into new areas of the environment and food chain as existing plastic products fragment into smaller particles and concentrate toxic chemicals that have a profound impact on our health. Today we will unpack how these plastics that we are exposed to affect us and what we can do to help minimize exposure. My name is Tiaan de Jager. I am the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Pretoria. To help us understand today's topic better and answer the questions you may have on environmental plastics, I am joined by two experts, Dr. Natalie Anneck-Hahn and Dr. Sean Patrick. Dr. Anneck-Hahn is the Director of the Environmental, Chemical Pollution and Health Research Unit at UP, and she completed her doctorate in biomedical technology on screening for antioxidant pollutants and estrogenicity in drinking water in poverty-stricken areas of South Africa in 2003. Her research focused on the effect of endocrine-disrupting chemicals on male reproductive health and the environment, and she has authored and co-authored several technical reports and peer-reviewed publications. Our second speaker, Dr. Sean Patrick. He is a lecturer in the School of Health Systems and Public Health at the University of Pretoria and a scientist in the Environmental, Chemical Pollution and Health Research Unit. His research focus area is environmental endocrine disruptors and how to address the impact of these chemicals on the Sustainable Development Goals. Welcome, Natalie and Sean. And thank you for joining us today. Before we start with a discussion, a reminder to post your questions and remarks in the comments section, which we will address. I'm going to start with you, Natalie. We see a lot of headlines saying plastics must go, that they are detrimental to the environment and our health. Can you explain why?
Thank you, Tiaan. Yes. Plastics are made from petroleum products, and they are made to be durable and long-lasting. And in order to do that, we need to add certain chemicals called plasticizers to them. And many of these chemicals that are added to the plastics are known as endocrine-disrupting chemicals. And that means that those chemicals are able to mimic our normal hormonal systems and then scramble the hormonal systems in our bodies and cause adverse effects from that. Types of chemicals that we are talking about as plasticizers is bisphenol A, also known as BPA, nonylphenol, phthalates are a big group, and also the adipates are also added to the plastics to make them durable and flexible.
So if I understand you correctly, in addition to the toxic effect, we can have a hormone disruptive effect
Exactly.
coming from these plasticizers.
Yes, with consequences too.
A question that gets asked a lot is, should we drink bottled water or is tap water fine? Have you done any work on this, and what would be the preference?
Yes, we have actually. We had a PhD student, Dr. Van Sale, who had a look at bottled water versus distribution point water, which eventually lands up in our tap systems. She selected 10 brands of bottled water from different sources and different processes across South Africa, all in PET bottles, and we collected tap distribution point water from Pretoria and Cape Town for very specific reasons. We then did target analyses on these, looking for nonylphenol, bisphenol A, our group of phthalates, and also DEHA. And we did the same with the tap water. But what we also did with the bottled water is we did it at different temperatures. And because it is known that these plasticizers leach out at higher temperatures. And this is exactly what we found, was that at higher temperatures, these plastics did leach into the bottled water. We also picked them up in the tap water, though, at various times through our monitoring. So when we did the risk assessment, it actually was found to be low risk, the exposures. So, you know, it's basically consumer choice.
Very interesting. So is there some other mark or logo of approval that the consumer can look at?
Yes, the South African National Bottled Water Association promotes the use of PET bottles, and they have put their logo on the bottles. So it's always good to look for this logo because it means that these plastics have been tested.
Sean, has there been a movement away from plastic products?
Yes, Prof. There has been. What we're seeing now more and more is people are moving away from using plastics, or what we call once-off plastics. So we are now moving to using more sustainable products. If you look in the stores now, you see the sports bottles, the water bottles. They're made from different products such as glass and so on. Also, if you go in some of your shopping centers now, you'll see that they don't have any plastic bags anymore like we used to have. You now have reusable bags. And also in your restaurants, they've moved away from having plastic straws. So these are very small steps, but it is at least a start. We're now going into using more sustainable products that are both safer for human health, but as well as for the environment.
Natalie, you've mentioned some technical names, nonylphenol and phthalates. I assume those are all plasticizers.
Yes, that.
But what other plastics should we be aware of that we use in our homes or maybe at work?
Well, my favorite is cling wrap. Us as South Africans love our cling wrap. We like to wrap our cheese in it, our meat in it. Any food is always covered in cling plastic, and then we pop it in the microwave and we heat it. And the minute we heat it, these plasticizers can leach into our food. So we did a study very similar to the bottled water study. Cancer also funded us for that, where we looked at industrial and commercial cling wrap brands. And we also did the same target analyses on the same set of plasticizers. And interestingly enough, 5 of the brands showed that they had all the 3 phthalates in them. But of the greatest concern was the fact that there was a brand that had DEHA, which is the adipate, at very high levels, and the health risk showed that there was a 50 times higher chance of developing cancer.
that is scary. So we should start reading our labels.
That is true, but the good news of that study was the 2 cancer-approved brands had no chemicals in. They were below the detection limits, and those are the ones we need to use.
Dr. Patrick, is there a risk in reusing our plastic containers?
So yes, I mean, we're just talking now about reading labels, and you find on your plastics, they actually do have a number on, and this number actually does mean something. There are certain chemicals or certain chemicals in the plastics. They would leach out if the plastic is reheated, for example. So what we have is we have certain plastics that are meant for single use, and we have certain plastics that are meant for reuse. So when you look at the plastic, it will have a number on, and that number would signify what the name of the plastic is, what the common use is, whether it can be recycled, yes or no, and what is recommended, whether it is recommended for reuse or whether it's recommended for single use. So we need to get in the habit not of only reading any logos on our containers and brands, but also looking what type of plastic it is made of.
Thank you. Dr. Annekaan, what adverse health effects are associated with exposure to these plasticizers, and who is the most vulnerable?
So because these plasticizers are endocrine disrupting chemicals, it means it does affect the hormone system. So we're looking at neurodevelopmental effects, we're looking at reproductive effects, and also ultimately cancers and immune disorders with these exposures. The most vulnerable is actually the fetus, because the fetus goes through critical stages of development as it's going through its growth period, and exposure to these chemicals, and we must always remember it's never just one chemical, it's always more than one chemical, so it's a cocktail of chemicals. And with that at critical windows of exposure, we can have effects being occurring or being programmed into the fetus that will then be seen later on in life. We may see some at birth, especially in the boys with the hyperspadias, which is and cryptorchidism, which is undescended testes, and at puberty in the girls, precocious puberty, infertility later on in life, and in the men, prostate cancer, and let's not forget our young men, testicular cancer.
So it is quite complex. We are talking about a mixture of environmental compounds that might have endocrine disrupting properties. We're talking air pollutants, in this case the plasticizers, insecticides, and a whole range. Sean, what effect will the incorrect disposal of plastic products during the global pandemic have on the environment and public health in the future?
Prof, what we're seeing now is we're seeing that obviously because our lifestyles have changed quite dramatically. We are more reliant on the not fast life. Everything is conveniently packaged. We're at home, so you get a package that comes home, ready-made meals. What we're doing now is we are accumulating much more plastic waste than we used to in the past. We know that we aren't recycling as much as we should, and now we are building up more and more of this waste that has been incorrectly disposed. And unfortunately, we'll only be able to see these effects much later on once the pandemic is over. So we need to now already start thinking about what the correct disposal is. And coming back to, we talked about the numbers on the plastic containers, for example. So if it can be recycled, rather recycle that and reduce the environmental pollution.
I think that's an important point. Natalie talked about the cling wraps, but we also talk polystyrene,
Absolutely.
All sorts of plastic products that we daily use and are exposed to, for that matter.
Absolutely.
But what does the reduction of the use of plastic mean for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? So we're looking at the bigger picture now in terms of where we're heading in addressing these important health goals.
Right, so the Sustainable Development Goals really have an overarching goal of health and well-being for all. So there are many different facets where us as the consumers as well as the manufacturers also play a big role. So as far as pollution is concerned, SDG 3 specifically looks at health, but also one of the targets looks at reducing environmental pollution, such as plastic pollution, for example. But also SDG 12 talks about sustainable production. So we're really looking at, and for me, there are three main things that we should be doing in order to reduce the plastic. It's first to choose an alternative if we can. If we cannot choose an alternative, be aware which plastic can be recycled. And then lastly, use the product for what it's intended for. If it's single use, we use it for single use, so you limit the exposure that you have by reusing that plastic continuously, and then the chemicals leaching out into the food. And through that way, we will then again limit environmental pollution, which leads to some of the other SDGs. So it's interwoven in all the SDGs in order to achieve a healthy lifestyle, as well as personal health, as well as environmental health.
Should we really be concerned? I mean, in South Africa, people say we deal with important health issues like malaria, HIV, TB. This is interesting to most of us, but is it really important? Natalie, do we see health effects associated with these endocrine disrupting chemicals or coming from these plasticizers as such?
Yes, we do. And you've actually just mentioned malaria and TB, and there's pharmaceuticals involved there. And believe it or not, phthalates and other plasticizers are actually found in pharmaceuticals. So yes, I think we need to be concerned because they are everywhere. We need some industry buy-in to make the changes, because it is going to cost money. And also, in the future, we would like, I think, to look at some policy.
In the media, we've seen a lot about microplastics. Can you tell us, that's one of the questions we received online, what effects do microplastics have on our health?
Well, it's actually a two-pronged effect. First is that it's a solid particle that is entering our bodies. It starts in the food chain at plankton all the way up. We eat fish. We can find it. It has been found in tap water because the water treatment plants are not geared to take out the microplastics. So you then have the chemicals or the plastics that the microplastics are made of that will have an effect. But added to that, and that's been found a lot in studies done on microplastics in the ocean, is that pesticides like DDT and other endocrine disrupting chemicals actually attach to these microparticles. And once we ingest this microparticle, it is released again. And then it has an effect as well. So again, it's plastics and the rest of the cocktail.
Moving on to a next question, which I found very interesting. Talking to cosmetics, how is the effect of microplastics from cosmetics measured? So I think the question basically is the endocrine disrupting properties coming from various cosmetic and personal care products. How does that affect the human body?
Well, we use those on our skins, and it'll get into our bodies through dermal absorption. And unfortunately, these plastics and other chemicals are in sunscreens, which we need to use in our country. A lot of shampoos have it, nail polish. And what we need to get away from is like a new trend in the cosmetics are the microbeads. Those are microplastics. So that is something that you need to think twice of when you... There are other natural ways you can use them.
Sean, the next question. Where are there places that we can recycle our plastic bottles?
What I've seen, there are a number of shopping centers, for example, that have these very large containers where you can, and it's labeled your paper waste, your glass waste, your plastic waste. That is obviously the first place that you need to start. And also, I've also noticed that there are other places where you would see they would have these large recycle containers, and that's really where you should rather discard your plastic waste.
So it is also about health promotion, about
And
awareness, education.
It's extremely
and
important.
Changing our practices. That is very
Absolutely.
important.
Yes.
How will the movement away from plastics affect the economy? That is an interesting one, Sean.
True, it is a very interesting question, but again, if the manufacturers are involved in the conversation, then it means that you are manufacturing plastic products that can be reused, that do not contain the chemicals that could have a potential negative health effect. So by being involved in the entire process, the economy will not be affected. But again, it is a discussion that needs to be had where it's more about regulation and about policy, where you start off by manufacturing the correct products. When the consumer comes in, they're consuming a product that has been tested, where you know that the exposure is limited, and therefore the economy would not be affected as such. But again, it's long term. It's not a short term.
Yeah. So
solution.
I think the challenge is that there's something like 70,000 products already in use that's never been tested for endocrine disrupting properties.
Absolutely.
And now to go back would be quite cost effective, intensive actually,
Absolutely.
and challenging.
But when we talk about, we're in an age where we have innovation, there's new chemicals. So I mean, now is the time to step up and say, why don't we create these newer products? So we actually then step up to the plate and say, we can have products that are all food packaging that moves away from your plastics that would then break down for microplastics that are biodegradable, for example. So the opportunity is really there to do all of those things.
Yeah.
Let's take another question. What effects is the University of Pretoria making to ensure that the community at large is able to recycle plastics as easily as possible?
My goodness, okay. Well, I think the university itself has promoted that. If you walk around the campus itself, you will see on every campus there's the various waste disposal drums to try and educate and use. I've noticed that the use of this is getting much better and the students are more receptive to it. But again, we need to do an education drive, really, yes, to get out there, because I always think back, Zibi and the can, the dirt bin can, and that was such a good thing in my youth. I'm giving my age away here. But we need to, and that is part of what our unit is wanting to do, is to start at school level with the kids and do a drive right through, because it's the kids that regulate the parents.
But one thing I can say is I think the University of Pretoria is leading in terms of many of these green initiatives.
Yeah.
Proud to say water, electricity, and now also these potentially harmful chemicals.
Yes.
Let's see. A next question. With many plastics making their way into the ocean, how does this affect people who are mainly
Pescatarians.
destinations?
Sean, do you want to answer that?
Well, I think the main concern really that we have is that we have the bioaccumulation of some of these plastics. And unfortunately, when you eat fish, it would then accumulate in the tissues. So again, it depends on how long it's been exposed, what the type of chemical it is. It does the property of the chemical really. That would really be able to answer that question, that specific question about sole fish consumption.
Something that's also been in the news quite often, Natalie, is the use of baby bottles, but also soft toys.
Yes.
Can you maybe give our viewers a bit of background and information on that?
Yes, the BPA story actually almost started with the fact that it was found in baby bottles and baby
So that's
toys.
bisphenol A.
That's bisphenol A. Just to put it out there, everything that you see has a label BPA free. That's bisphenol A free. So it started with the plastic bottles and baby teething rings. But yes, I haven't done any work on it, but I should imagine you've got to have a look at the type of plastic that you are using or that the sterilizer is made of. It again comes down to know your plastics. If it's, for example, a plastic 7, that would be more problematic than a plastic like number 2, which is a high density or low density polyethylene. So you need to really know your plastics and know your numbers. Interestingly, just as a sidebar to the babies' sterilizers and plastics, we boil our kettles, and there's a lot of plastic kettles out on the market. And there's a reason they tell you to boil your kettle for a few times, because it's to get rid of a lot of these plastics that are in the kettles by heating them. But for the first time, I saw a kettle advertised that it was BPA free the other day. So again, I read the label. I took a consumer's responsibility to read the label. But yes.
The potential, we know that some of the toy stores withdrew some of their products because of the bisphenol A. Yes. Why? What is the potential health risk to the baby?
The potential health risk really is that as soon as the bottles or the toys are either washed or they are heated, you then have the chemicals leach out from these products. And again, when you think of how someone gets exposed, it's either you would ingest something or through skin absorption, for example. So by absorbing to the skin over a very long period of time, that is when you could potentially have an effect. And for that reason, rather being safe, some of the products were then withdrawn from the shelves.
Yes, it's the chronic low dose exposure that can be problematic.
And the use of a microwave?
Again, it comes down to the type of plastic. So the type of plastic, there are especially the single-use plastics. They're intended for the purpose of single use, and when they start being reused, it's the constant when the plastic gets heated. I mean, if we go back to the basics, the minute that a plastic is heated, some of the chemicals in the plastic leach out into the food. And when you constantly reheat consistently in the same container with the same hazardous chemicals, you are unintentionally exposing yourself. And that is really where the microwave plays sort of a bad role. But again, for convenience sake, we do but rather use a glass bowl, and so the process is still the same.
I think we've got time to slip in one last question. There are many countries where recycling is law, such as South Korea and the United Kingdom. Do you foresee laws such as these being implemented in South Africa? Natalie?
I think in the long term, it's a slow process. I think eventually we will get there. The water sector is working very hard at developing guidelines. We're actually currently involved in a global project where we are looking at certain ways of monitoring our water sources. And that is because the EU actually has legislation, and it is currently being reviewed for the water guidelines and the toxicology, the toxicity program that was started a few years back, but it is slow. But I think we will get there.
Thank you. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Natalie Annekaan and Dr. Sean Patrick for sharing their knowledge with us pertaining to the effect of environmental plastics and the dangers that pose to our health and the very environment in which we live. Thank you to the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Pretoria for affording us this platform to empower each other with factual information. And finally, thank you to our viewers for watching. We trust that it has been an informative session. Be sure to follow us and subscribe to all our social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn to stay up to date with the research findings as well as interesting developments in the field of health sciences. Stay safe and remember that your health is in your hands.
At the University of Pretoria's Faculty of Health Sciences, we believe in unearthing potential. We believe in our students' potential to make a positive impact in society and to produce research that shifts boundaries. In order to help students reach their full potential, the Faculty of Health Sciences has established the Life Changers Fund. Partner with us to help our life changers reach their full potential by contributing to the Student Solidarity Fund. Your contribution will help support students who are in need to pay for accommodation, tuition, food, and procure PPE. Join us and help support our students to reach their full potential. Through any contribution, you can be a life changer too. Developing life changers together.